On July 20th, 1969, American astronauts Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin became the first humans ever to land on the moon. About 6.5 hours later, Armstrong became the first person to walk on the moon. The Apollo 11 mission occurred 8 years after President John Kennedy announced a national goal of landing a man on the moon by the end of the 1960s. Apollo 17, the final manned mission, took place in 1972. For years, we have all speculated about just what indeed did happen on the moon and what the astronauts saw during their flyover and subsequent landing on the moon's surface. We've documented various video and photographic footage in the past showing the endless anomalies, structures, and mysterious activity that was captured during the moon missions. Today, we go straight to the horse's mouth and reveal through official NASA radio transmission transcripts that were taken during the moon missions, recorded from the astronauts themselves while on the moon, about the things that were up there and what they saw, and finally, what they had to say about their observations. Apollo 11, with Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Edwin Aldrin, was the first Apollo flight to land on the moon on July 20th, 1969. While Collins flew in orbit around the moon in the command module, Armstrong and Aldrin descended in the lunar module, landing in the Sea of Tranquility at 4:17 p.m. According to reports, both Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin saw UFOs shortly after that historic landing on the moon, with astronauts referring to lights in or around a crater during the television transmission, followed by a request from Mission Control for further information. Nothing more was heard. The following astonishing conversation was picked up by ham radio operators that had their own VHF receiving facilities that bypassed NASA's broadcasting outlets. At this time, the live television broadcast was interrupted for 2 minutes due to a supposed, quote, overheated camera, but the transmission below was received loud and clear by hundreds of ham radio operators. According to Otto Binder, who was a member of the NASA space team, when the two moonwalkers, Aldrin and Armstrong, were making their rounds some distance from the limb, Armstrong clutched Aldrin's arm excitedly and exclaimed this. The book, Celestial Rays, by Richard Watson, published 1987, records the following continuation of the above remarkable dialogue of Apollo 11, which was picked up by hundreds of ham radio operators in the USA. According to the book, quote, during the transmission of the moon landing of Armstrong and Aldrin, 2 minutes of silence occurred in which the image and sound were interrupted. NASA insisted that this was a problem resulting from one of the television cameras which had overheated, thus interfering with the reception. This unexpected problem surprised even the most qualified viewers who were unable to explain how in such a costly project, one of the most essential elements could break down. Sometime after the historic moon landing, Christopher Kraft, director of the base in Houston, made some surprising comments when he left NASA. The contents of these comments, which is included in the conversations you're about to read, have been corroborated by hundreds of amateur radio operators who had connected their stations to the same frequency through which the astronauts transmitted. During the 2-minute interruption, which was not as it seemed, NASA, Armstrong, and Aldrin, along with Cape Kennedy, censored both image and sound to report on alleged spacecraft that were then seen on the moon. Here is the alleged dialogue between the American astronauts and Control Center. According to Dr. Vladimir Azasia, Neil Armstrong relayed the message to Mission Control that 2 large mysterious objects were watching them after having landed, but this message was never heard by the public because NASA censored it. According to other sources, Buzz Aldrin took color movie film of the UFOs from inside the module and continued filming them after he and Armstrong went outside. Armstrong confirmed that the story was true but refused to go into further detail, beyond admitting that the government was behind the cover-up. As the astronauts orbited the moon in their Apollo spacecraft, they were forced to spend half of each revolution hidden behind the lunar far side. During this period of time, they were cut off from all communication with Mission Control in Houston. To ensure that spacecraft telemetry was still recorded during this period of time, one of the devices NASA relied on was known as the DSEA, or Data Storage Equipment Assembly. Mounted in the limb, the DSEA was essentially a black box flight data recorder. While out of contact behind the moon, it recorded data from the limb on an internal 4-track tape. That taped telemetry, after being brought back to Earth, was then analyzed by NASA technicians. In addition to recording telemetry related to the performance of the LEM spacecraft itself, the DSEA also made audio recordings of any crew conversations that went on inside the LEM while it was around the far side of the moon. NASA has never made these audio recordings available to the public. However, transcripts of this far side crew dialogue from the DSEA tapes are available in the NASA archives. Though heavily censored, these transcripts offer a glimpse into some of the less guarded dialogue that took place inside the LEM when the astronauts were out of radio contact with Houston. Just to be clear, the astronauts are discussing a noise they are suddenly hearing behind the far side of the moon, a noise that sounds like music. You will note that the music is being heard in both spacecraft by all 3 astronauts at the same time. And a few seconds later, Gene in the LM radios John Young in the CSM to confirm that he is hearing the same sound. After a few moments of tending to the flight plan, the astronauts continue their radio conversation about the mysterious melody. What is the most interesting is that after reacquisition of the signal, at no time do any of the astronauts ever make any mention to Mission Control about this music that they were hearing while around the moon's far side. That is, at least, not over the public radio channel. So, there is much to be seen with regards to what exactly happened on the moon during these historic Apollo moon missions. Now, it has always been our position that we did go to the moon. There is a vast sea of film footage and imagery that confirms that we did go to the moon, that you can see plain as day is real footage and not faked, not a model, and nothing that the government cooked up. What I will say, however, is that once we were on the moon, which is then corroborated in these transcripts, was that things were seen there that could not be made public. And hence, much of the footage was either cut out due to the mysterious overheating of cameras, as well as completely recreated video clips that were then given to the public as the real thing. However, there is no doubt that there has been and continues to be alien activity happening on our moon and also around many other celestial bodies within our solar system. We have done many videos on this in the past, so I urge you to go through Secure Team's past videos regarding the moon, regarding Mars, regarding Saturn, and get yourself up to speed. We are living in amazing times, and the mystery behind the Apollo moon missions will no doubt forever be an amazing topic of discussion. So be sure to stick right here with Secure Team. Do your own research, email us with your own stories or information. We're always here to respond. And as always, hit that like and subscribe button on your way out if you like the work we do, and stick around because we've got a lot more coming. Stay safe, guys.